If you love indie brands as much as I do, then this video is perfect for you, because today we're going to shine a spotlight on one of my favorite indie brand owners, Angelica Nyqvist, who owns Singe Beauty. I'm going to take a deep dive into as many of these makeup brushes as I can and let you guys know the real tea on whether or not these brushes are as good as the mass-produced expensive brushes, or if they're a flop. Okay, as far as I know, the makeup brushes, both the eye and face set, were the first product launch from Singe Beauty. Since then, they've released some blushes, as in just a few days ago, as well as some makeup bags, so I'm excited to try those out as well. I've actually had these in my possession for like 6 months and just haven't gotten around to reviewing them, so here we are, better late than ever, right?
Right.
In addition to all these beautiful makeup brushes, they also released a powder puff as well as a beauty sponge, which I'll be using this today. So let's talk about the brushes themselves first before we start putting makeup on my face. So for starters, they don't feel cheap. I've had some makeup brushes where they feel like they were probably made for like 2 cents and sold for like 30 bucks. This doesn't feel like that. The bristles on all of these brushes are synthetic and they're meant to feel like regular hair, which is great. They feel very, very soft on the skin. I love that, and even though they feel soft, that doesn't matter if they don't work, you know what I mean? So we'll find out if they actually work well, but as far as feeling, they feel great. You definitely don't want to use makeup brushes that feel scratchy on your face or your skin just because that's uncomfortable, and it really just means you need some better ones. I really, really love the color. The traditional Singe Beauty yellow color is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, for me personally, this wouldn't be the first color I would choose if I was going out and buying brushes, but I just think that they are pretty stunning. I usually go for like pinks, blues, purples, things like that. So this is very, very different. And in my giant collection of makeup brushes, these are certainly gonna stand out. Time to start throwing on some makeup. I'm gonna take the damp, not wet beauty sponge and dip into a little bit of this House Labs foundation from the back of my hand. And we'll start applying and see how this goes. Now for me, what I'm looking for in a beauty sponge is 1, how does it feel on my skin? 2, is it gonna absorb the majority of my product, which is not what we want? Or 3, what does the final finish look like from my foundation? Because if you didn't know, different beauty sponges and different application methods can drastically change the final look of your foundation. So I really want it to look airbrushed. I want it to look like my skin, but better, and usually that's what I get. I get that airbrushed, soft, nice looking foundation, nice looking base, but it also has the coverage I want. Alrighty, first impressions would be that the sponge definitely absorbs a lot of product because I put 1 full pump on the back of my hand, and normally that does like more than half of my face. And as you see, I just stamped on it like 2 or 3 times, like that, and all the product is off my hand, it's on the sponge. So that's not great for me personally, but at the end of the day, if my foundation looks great on my skin, that's what matters most. To an extent though, because I do want to point out though, if your sponge is absorbing the majority of your product, that means you're having to apply more of the product just to actually get it to cover your entire face, which means you're gonna go through the product faster, which means you're gonna spend more money. And at the end of the day, that's not really a great thing, you know? Alrighty, foundation is done. It took me a total of 8 pumps of foundation using the House Labs foundation. And that's like 4 times more of the amount of foundation than I normally use. So I really, really don't love that. The sponge itself feels very soft on my skin, has a great bounce to it, but I definitely noticed that the coverage of my foundation is probably like 50%, like half of what it normally is. But the actual final finish of this foundation is very, very nice. It just looks like my skin with like very light coverage, which I like a good full coverage, soft moment. This is giving me half that coverage, but also at the same time, it's certainly accentuating some of the texture on my skin, which normally my skin looks like porcelain. And right now I feel like I can see every bit of texture on my face, including texture that like doesn't really exist, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not really loving that. So I don't know, I feel conflicted because it's glowy and it's soft and pretty, but at the same time, it's accentuating all the things that you wouldn't want to have accentuated. Maybe as this foundation dries down, it won't look as obvious. Next, we're going in with some concealer, and I'm gonna try out the FO2 brush. This design is so, so cool. I've only ever seen one brush that's actually not released yet that looks just like this with the same shape, so I'm excited to try this out. And no, I'm not gonna tell you which brand is releasing that brush. Alright, I'm going to start with the smallest areas first. Let me turn my light on, that's better. I'm going to start with the smallest areas first, and wow, that blends fast. I really, really like the concept of this brush because the shape of it will allow you to get into those smaller, tighter areas, which I like. The concealer is blending out right away, which is nice. Again, this brush feels very, very soft on my skin, so I love that. I'm just going to try and do all of my concealer with this. Normally, I'm not a fan of using brushes for foundation or concealer or honestly any liquid products. I prefer to use brushes just for powder products. Usually I just use a damp beauty sponge and it always works like a charm, but I'm just gonna try and use these brushes as much as I can. Okay, it looks decent in place, but I am gonna still take my sponge regardless and stamp over it. I just like to make sure everything is nice and melted into my skin and looks seamless. Taking the same brush, I'm gonna start with my under eyes, stamp that concealer in, and work its way up and out. You guys know I like to take my concealer up at an angle to create that really sharp appearance. I will say that the bristles themselves are really not absorbing much product, which for me is a bad thing with concealer. I do want quite a bit of it to be absorbed by the sponge. That way it's really, really soft and airbrush looking. This is just a lot, so it just takes an extra second to blend out, but it is blending nicely. You see how just stamping over it just blends everything out and it creates the most perfect seamless gradient? That's exactly what I'm looking for, and that's why I always prefer beauty sponges over brushes. The coverage is stunning, especially when I use the brush first, followed by the sponge. Okay, concealer is done using the F02 brush, and I'm very, very impressed by it. It blended everything out very, very nicely. The bristles feel amazing on my skin. The shape of this brush really allows you to get, especially to those inner corners under your eyes, stamp things out. If you're someone that puts concealer along the sides of your nose, like your smile lines, obviously you can get right on in there. This would also be great for touching up little spots like this where you start to crease throughout the day naturally, but really love this. Next, we're gonna try out the Singe Beauty Powder Puff, and I'm gonna go in with a little bit of my Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Lavender Setting Powder. I just roll a little bit of this onto the back of my hand, and I just start stamping everything into place. Now, I don't expect miracles with this powder puff, just because I feel like all powder puffs are just about the same. I expect it to just work like it's supposed to. One thing I will say from a lot of beauty reviews that I see is that, I don't know, for some reason, a lot of creators feel like they have to just overhype things. Like, at the end of the day, some products are just going to be the same across the board, no matter who is releasing them. Just like these powder puffs, I feel like 99.9% of them are always going to be the same. So when I see people just freak out over something that's like such a basic product like a powder puff, I'm less inclined to believe their review, and I feel like they have a little bit of bias or, you know, some ulterior motive or incentive to hype up that product, because things like powder puffs can only work so well. You know what I mean? Like, what can you do to a powder puff to make it like exceptional from one powder puff to the next? Normally I do not set my entire face, but today I am, because this foundation is just not looking real cute on me right now. Like, it's as it's sitting on my skin longer and longer, I feel like it's looking worse and worse. So I am gonna set my entire face, and that's definitely helping. Now my entire face looks super smooth, it looks blurred, it looks nice. I'm starting to see, I don't know if you can see it as much, but in person, I'm starting to see a little bit of separation on my forehead, and I don't love that. Alrighty, time for bronzer. So we're gonna start off by trying out the F05 brush. This is definitely the fluffiest brush that I have in my collection, so I feel like it's the only one that I could use for bronzer. And for bronzer, we're using the Fenty Beauty Sunstalker bronzer in the shade Into Sun 01. Now for a quick comparison, normally I use a brush that's this fluffy for my bronzer because it's gonna give you the most diffused, glowy complexion. This is what I love. This is definitely a lot more dense. I feel like it's gonna take a little bit more work to give you that really airbrushed, glowy, diffused look. So I'm gonna hold the brush at the very, very bottom, so I'm not applying a lot of pressure, so I can try to make this as glowy as possible. Alrighty, so obviously this brush is getting the job done. I definitely don't feel like the bronzer is as pigmented because I don't feel like I can, well, I know that I can't load up the brush as much as I normally do. And again, it's gonna take probably twice as long to actually get my bronzer done, just because I can only cover so much surface area in comparison to my regular brush, which obviously I can apply 2 or 3 times as much. I feel like people always question it when I bronze my jawline. They're like, bro, you got facial hair. You can't see it. But it's just a habit from when I used to not have facial hair. Alrighty, the perimeter of my face has its bronzer on. I definitely don't think it looks good as it normally does, but the job is technically done. So again, I prefer my regular super fluffy powder brushes. I know this really isn't like a fluffy powder brush, but out of all the brushes I have, it's the only one that I could use for bronzer. Now for nose contour, even though I use bronzer to contour my nose, I'm gonna go in with the E04. This is an eye brush. But again, as far as like the actual complexion brushes, there aren't any that I would use for my nose. So I'm just gonna use this. Not everything has to be used for its like intended purpose, you know? That's the beauty of makeup and makeup tools like brushes and whatnot. Like, you can find different ways to use them, and if it gets the job done, it gets the job done. Okay, once I have that powder bronzer on, I'll just take my damp sponge again and just lightly stamp over it, just to blend out those harsh lines, like always. I don't know, we're struggling with the base today. This is why I don't like brushes for complexion products. It never looks as good as when you use a sponge. I don't care what anyone says or anyone thinks, it's my fact. Like it's a fact for me. Next, we're gonna dive into some blush using the F06 brush. For blush, we're using the Blend Bunny X Alice Atlantis palette. This is the Lunar Eclipse Dimension palette. I'm gonna dip into the shade 0, which is the lightest pink here. I'm just gonna stamp this along my cheekbones and take it up into my hairline. Now this definitely is picking up more product than the blush brushes I normally use. So that could be a good thing for some and a bad thing for others. Now, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you know that I prefer more of a bronzy kind of look. I don't really like that cutesy pink look. Like this does not look good on me at all. So this brush, if you're wanting like a lot of blush placement, you probably like it because it definitely picks up the product. So by no means is that technically a bad thing. It's just my own preference. It doesn't really go with the type of makeup that I like to wear. So I am going to take my damp sponge and try to stamp over that a little bit just to tone it down and blend it in with my bronzer a little bit, just so it's not as harsh. Easy fix. Blend it out, not blended. Again, if you like that more pigmented, noticeable blush moment, then I definitely think you'd like this brush. Again, it's very, very soft on the skin, and it is doing what it's supposed to do. So it's not a complaint for me on that aspect. It's just that for me, I don't like a lot of blush. I'm gonna take that bronzer brush I was using and just stamp over it a little bit, just so it's nice and blended. I definitely noticed like right here where my concealer is, it's just not looking as sharp and in place just because of using that brush. Normally, like I said, if I just start off with a sponge, everything is seamless, everything is smooth and diffused, where it's just like super, super harsh. It's just really hard to get rid of that harshness. All right, I'm gonna throw on a little bit of setting spray. This is the One Size Beauty Until Dawn Matte Setting Spray. A lot of times setting spray can really save your makeup. The way it just blends everything together, melts all your powders and your cream products together, can really, really help. So hopefully this does the trick. It's so weird to me because like this setting spray, oh, it's up my nose. Oh, this setting spray, This setting spray is literally like hairspray, so your face doesn't get wet, which is so, so weird. Now it's time for some highlighter. So we're gonna try out the F07 brush. Looks like this. For highlighter, we're using the new Blend Bunny X Donnie Darkowitz Simply Put Highlighter Quad. I'm dipping into the shade, let's try something different. Okay, we're gonna dip into the shade right here. It's called IKDR. I don't know what that stands for, but it has a little bit of a pink shift to it. Oh, that's just literally falling out of the pan. I'm just gonna give this a little shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Whoa. One thing about these highlighters though, they are pigmented, like blinding-oo. This brush being a little bit more on the denser side too is gonna really allow you to load up a bit more product and then also apply a lot more product. So if you don't want a lot to show up, maybe this isn't the brush for you, but if you really love that blinding moment, this is for you. How stunning that is though, honestly. It's harsh over there, man. Glowy over there. Let's do a little bit right there, just for the hell of it. And as always, beauty sponge. I stamp over all my makeup usually with my sponge. It just creates a really nice seamless blend, and I feel like that's super important. We don't want anything harsh. Much better. Definitely softens it up, which is what I want. I don't want to look like a walking disco ball, but I definitely want you to notice it there when I turn my head. Alrighty, now we're gonna move into eyeshadow. As you can see, I already did this cute little blue and purple look over here, soft and easy. Let me show you how to do it on this eye. For the eyeshadow palette, we're using the new Blend Bunny X Donnie Darkowitz Little Miss She Never Misses palette. We're focusing on indie brands today, of course. So to start off, we're using the E06 blending brush. I'm dipping into the shade Powerline. So I'm just gonna start stamping this purple into my crease, taking it all the way down to my inner corner, bringing it out to my outer corner and down onto my lid. This is just gonna give me my general shape. I definitely already have some thoughts on these eye brushes. For starters, they're not as soft as the complexion brushes at all. Definitely some of them are a little bit scratchy, like this one's a little bit scratchy. As you can see, it's definitely laying down the shadow pretty nicely, but when I start to actually blend the shadows, you'll see it doesn't move a lot at the very top, at the very bottom it does. So it's just kind of going like this, rather than like I need it to do. Now that we have that purple laid on, I'm just gonna scratch the edges a little bit, just to soften them up before I apply our blue. But you see, like as I'm turning it, it's not necessarily the bristles that are touching my eyelid that are moving, it's right here, right there. So it's feeling like you're moving around and blending it, but you're kind of really not. So it's like, I have to like hold my brush all the way at the end and literally like almost touch my eye, but not, just so I can get the actual bristles to do their job and not my wrist. So I'm not loving that. Next, we're gonna take an E03 brush and dip into the shade Tajira down here, which is this light blue. I'm just gonna start scratching the edge with this blue. Like I said, it's kind of the same thing with this brush. You see the very base of the bristles moving, but not necessarily the bristles themselves that are touching my eye. So like right now I'm going like this, and it's like the brush really isn't even going in circles all the way. It looks like it is just because the base is moving. So it's very strange. I've never experienced something like that before. This brush itself definitely feels much softer than the first one I was just using. Obviously, as you can see from the other eyeshadow over here, the job gets done. And I mean, that definitely matters, but I don't care who's making what product. You know, people at the end of the day are spending their money, so I'm always going to be honest. I don't care if it's somebody I know or if I've met them, or it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I purchased the items or were gifted the items. I'm always honest with everybody no matter what, because at the end of the day, it's just business. Nothing's personal. I'm always going to give my most absolute honest opinions and thoughts on anything, whether it's makeup brushes, makeup products, it just doesn't matter. But I do also try to be as fair as possible. Like, I'm always looking for positive things just as much as I'm looking for things to criticize, because at the end of the day, if I want to give you a fully well-rounded, you know, review or first impressions on something, I want to be very mindful about what I'm talking about and really point out every little thing, whether it's good or bad. Okay, once we have that blue on, I'm going to dip into a little bit of that purple again, the first shade we used with the first brush, just to bring back a little bit of the depth that we lost with the purple from when we were blending. Definitely something I notice people not doing is going back in and reapplying their first shadows when they're blending their eyeshadow. It's like they lay down their colors, blend, and then they go on with their day. And I'm like, you lose so much of that saturation and that depth when you're blending, which is completely normal, but it just takes a couple seconds to bring back a little bit more. So again, go back into that blue that we were just using. And blend the edges one more time. Next, we're taking the EO2 brush, and I'm going to dip into a little bit of Moomy, which is this purple right here. And this I'm just going to lightly feather in between that first purple and that blue, just to make that line go away a little bit more and create a little bit more of a seamless blend. I definitely believe that there are some colors that are harder to blend together than others, and for me, blues and purples, which I feel like you'd think would be really, really easy to blend together, are one of the hardest colors for me to blend seamlessly. And definitely in person, the blend always looks much, much better than it shows up on camera. So that's kind of annoying, because like this blend right now is actually perfectly seamless in person. Like on camera, you definitely can like see a little bit of the line, but what can you do? Okay, for under eye, we're going with the EO7 brush. I'm gonna take that same purple Moomy shade, and I'm gonna take this as close to my lower lash line as I can and connect it with my upper eyeshadow and take it all the way over. This is not normally the kind of brush I would use for my under eyes, but out of the eye brushes that I have in this collection, it's definitely the only one that makes sense. Alrighty, next for the shimmer on the lid, I'm gonna be taking the EO1 brush, which is right here, and we're gonna dip into the shade Kenneth, which is this beautiful purple, light purple shimmer right here. Now these ones do have a bit of fallout, so I definitely recommend tilting your head back to fill in this space. Normally I always say with Blend Bunny shimmers to use your finger, but obviously I wanna use as many of these brushes as I can. I would not normally apply shimmers with a brush. Now for me, I do have hooded eyes, so I like to take my shimmers above my natural crease, just so you can see it a little bit more when my eyes are open and I'm looking straight at you. Does anyone else apply makeup without having their mouth hang open? So you see when I look straight ahead, you can still see a little bit of that shimmer popping up. Hooded eye gang, where you at? Let me know in the comments, you have hooded eyes, yes or no? I wanna know. If you do, hey bestie. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of that Powerline purple that we used at the very, very beginning and just quickly stamp this on the outer corner, and then go in little circular motions just to blend it together so there's no harsh line, and it makes everything a bit more cohesive. All right, let me quickly throw on some liner, mascara, lashes, a lip, and I'll be right back to show you the final look and give you my final thoughts. All right, I'm back. Look is all complete. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments. 1 to 10. Are we giving it a 10? I would give it like a 9. I would give it a 9. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. All right, so let's run through my final thoughts on this Singe Beauty brush, sponge, and puff collection. Starting off with these little guys first. The puff is just a regular puff. It does the job, gets the job done. There's no tricks, gimmicks, nothing special about it. There's nothing underwhelming about it either. Like I said earlier, some products are just meant to do what they're supposed to do, and that's it. And there's really very little that you could do to these types of products to make them stand out from other brands. So nothing wrong with that, but 10 out of 10, did the job just fine. Now, the beauty sponge, on the other hand, it's very, very soft. Now, I know you didn't see it before it was wet, but it was about half the size, so it definitely grew in size, which is what they're supposed to do. I definitely would say that I did not love this sponge, and I use a lot of beauty sponges because, like I mentioned earlier, I prefer beauty sponges for like almost all of my complexion makeup, so I know what I'm talking about when it comes to sponges. As far as applying the product, I would not rate this too highly. Normally it takes me about 2 full pumps of foundation to do my entire face and my neck, and it took me 8, and I literally mean 8 pumps of foundation. It definitely absorbs like 80% of your foundation, which like I mentioned earlier is not that great of a thing because then you're gonna go through your product faster, spend more money to replace your foundations, and nobody wants that. As far as applying it on my skin, it bounced nicely. It was very, very soft. It got into all the areas. Again, it's a beauty sponge. There's only so much that you can do with beauty sponges to make them different from other ones, but I will say I had a lot of issue with actually making my foundation look nice. It did give me kind of like a skin-like texture that was soft. I definitely lost like at least half of the coverage I would normally get out of my foundation. And I definitely had some areas where it created little like stamping things on my face, like little marks, and I had to correct those a little bit. Also, I wanted to point out that I'm definitely having issues. Again, I don't know if you could see up here, but it's starting to really separate on my forehead and my nose. Like I said earlier, my complexion usually looks like porcelain, both on camera and in person. It is something that I feel like I'm known for, especially when people meet me and they're like, wow, your skin really is that smooth looking. Yes, I have perfected my base. So the only thing that I've changed in this routine today is the sponge, and I would not be comfortable going out in public with my foundation looking the way it does. It does not look nice. It's certainly separating a lot. I'm sure you can see right here. It's separating a lot. So I would not personally use this again. As far as brushes, let's start off with the complexion ones first. So for concealer, we went in with the EO2 brush. I really liked this brush. It got into all the nooks and crannies. It was very easy to blend things out. It did a great job. I think the design of this brush, again, is very cool, very unique. Like I said, I am working with a company right now that is releasing a brush soon that looks just like this. So I've personally never seen another brush look like this prior to that other company. So that is a good thing because I don't think that this exact shape is super common. Correct me if I'm wrong, I just have not really seen them. For blush, we use the F06 brush. This just is a traditional looking blush brush. It's definitely a little bit smaller than what I'm used to, and so it took a little bit longer to apply my blush. Now this is a little bit smaller than I'm used to, which also means it's a bit more dense. So like I showed you earlier, it definitely applied the blush a little bit more than I would personally like, but it's super easy to tone down blush most times. Like right now, at this point, you can barely even see it, if at all. So if you are someone who's a bit heavy-handed, I would be careful with this brush because you are gonna apply a bit more than maybe you normally would, so just keep that in mind. Overall, it's not a bad brush though. For highlighter, we went in with the F07 brush. This did a great job at applying my highlighter. I was able to apply a lot of it like that. I will say though that it definitely started to pull away from my foundation, especially like I was kind of showing a little bit ago right here. Some of these brushes were kind of ripping off my foundation, which obviously is not a good thing. So I did have a little bit of trouble with that with these brushes, but overall this brush was okay. And for my nose contour, we went in with the EO4 brush. This is actually just a small eyeshadow brush. I just used it for my nose. It got the job done, nothing special. I really don't have anything else to say about it. Now onto eye brushes. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was applying the actual eyeshadow to my lids, the very top of the bristles were not dispersing. They were not spreading out. They were not blending like normal eyeshadow brushes do. The base of them is what really was moving. So that was kind of weird and definitely was like cramping on my arms because I was literally having to like move my entire arm to actually get the bristles to go in a circle to blend. So I had a little bit of trouble with that. So definitely not my favorite thing. I would say the first one was pretty scratchy on my eye, and even just touching it now, it's pretty harsh. So it's not the most comfortable, whereas the second one is very soft. So I love that, of course. For the shimmer on my lids, I use the EO1 brush. This just did a great job at loading up product, packing it onto my lids, no problem whatsoever. This was very soft, loved it. For my under eye eyeshadow, I use the EO7 brush. You could also use this as a packing brush to apply your shimmers if you wanted. I just ran this underneath my lower lash line with the purple and it did a great job. On a softness level of 1 to 10, I would give this like a 7. And lastly, I use the EO2 brush. This was used for that purple that was in between the first purple and the blue, just to kind of create more of a bit of a gradient. Nothing wrong with this. It's really soft. It did what I needed it to do. But again, all of these main eyeshadow blending brushes, you just do the weird thing where like the base of them moves, but the top doesn't move as much. Let me show you with a different brush. You see this blending brush, how the very tip of it, everything moves. Like you start to blend and all of the bristles, you see it? Look at that. It does that essentially, but on a smaller scale. So like when I'm blending, they are all moving, they all do a great job. Whereas these other ones, like I said, they just, the very bottom of them moves. It's like this. It's just not the same. I don't know, it's just not the same. Like there's something different about those brushes enough for me to notice is my point. Now I haven't personally seen a lot of reviews on these brushes, so hopefully if you're someone who has been looking for a review, you found mine, you enjoyed it, you thought it was very insightful and covered all the bases, as I try to do my best in every review that I make. But with that being said, that's all I have in today's Singe Beauty review. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you give it a big thumbs up down below. Don't forget to click that big red subscribe button so you can join my YouTube family, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm super excited to try out all of these brushes, but before we get into that, I do want to mention, no I don't, that's later. Okay, never mind. All right, next we're gonna go in with concealer. Next we're gonna go in with some, all right, time for some bronzer. So we're going in with the Fenty Beauty Into Sun. I lost track already. 1, feeling, 2, absorbing, oh. Bronzer brushes. I said that very weird. Filming at 2 in the morning is the worst thing because Leo and Bella just want to escape and then come in and then escape and then come in and then escape then come in because I do want a good because now I definitely already have some thoughts on these eye brushes alone. That makes no sense. What is this, Fenty? Yeah, duh. I don't remember what I just said. But 2, is it absorbing already the F, oh my god. Already foundation. Okay, I'm gonna try my best. So I'm gonna hold the brush.